Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, I want to go back into Amstel Gold because, of course, we have a Flèche Wallonne starting tomorrow. Now, Flèche Wallonne is another semi-classic. It is not as big as Amstel Gold, and it's certainly not as big as Liège-Bastogne-Liège. The two monuments before it and the one after Liège-Bastogne-Liège, of course, being the biggest of this three races. Now, of course, you know the sixth monument is Amstel Gold, and they just finished that where Matthias Skjelmos won. I want to go into the interview that Tadej Pogačar gave after Amstel Gold because that kind of sets the precedent from my view as a coach on what we might see at Flèche Wallonne and, of course, Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Flèche, important without a doubt, is certainly one of the semi-classics out there, but we all know everyone is going to be 100% targeted at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. That means Tadej Pogačar will be focused on Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but because Flèche is a bit of a shorter course, it's not 250, 260K like we saw Amstel Gold and Liège-Bastogne-Liège is going to be. It means that Tadej Pogačar's UAE Team Emirates can control most of the race of Flèche with just his teammates. That means if you go into Amstel and you go into Liège-Bastogne-Liège, normally UAE Team Emirates would not have the power to control it deep into the races like we saw at Amstel Gold, where they kind of started losing power at about 56 kilometers to go. When we look at the back of the peloton there at Amstel, and you see that it's Grosschartner coming off the back, then the cameras go back up to the front, and we see that it's Sivakov, that I know since the cameras have been on with 70 and 75 kilometers to go during Amstel, that Sivakov's already been on the front. We can assume he was on longer, and we can assume Grosschartner was on longer before that too. But now at that moment, when we're talking about 55 kilometers to go, just before EF Education get on the front, so I'll call it about 56, UAE team members are down to three riders. Tadej Pogačar, Brandon McNulty, I'll assume, has not been on the front, but of course I didn't watch the whole race, so I could be wrong. At this moment, from what I've seen, though, Brandon McNulty has not been on the race, but Sivakov has, and Grosschartner's at the back, like I've already pointed out to you. That means that we're coming into 55 kilometers to go. There's only two riders left for Tadej Pogačar to be able to control the race. Now, for the Slovenian, normally that's not a problem. He solos from 80K out. We see it all the time, and I've done videos about it all the time. But what makes this race so different because of the length of it and because UAE team members are starting to lose power at that moment, Tadej Pogačar has to be able to decide when he's going to go up the road. Now, they got a gift at Amstel Gold when we're talking about EF Education getting on the front. These knuckleheads should have never been on the front. Now, I'll give some props to Palace because Palace later did some suffering, came back, and he rode tactically sound, trying to help defend the race and bring Tadej Pogačar back later. But the knuckleheads at the front right now for EF Education pulling UAE Team Emirates into the next climb with 55 kilometers to go as they start getting on the front. That is a knucklehead move. At this moment, you want to create the next break and you want to start attacking with all of your teammates from EF Education. And then you want to force UAE Team Emirates with Sivakov and, of course, with Brandon McNulty to get on the front for Tadej Pogačar so that Tadej can become isolated. You always want a rider like Tadej Pogačar to become isolated, and then you can start attacking him in numbers. That's how you beat him. Or you send them up the road with 80 kilometers to go and you work together with multiple teams behind. It's never happened in the 4 years I've done the butterfly effect or Beyond the Coverage, but that's the way it should be done. If Tadej Pogačar goes early, teams work together. Now, once we fast forward a little bit further, we go into where UAE team members see that EF Education are taking control of the front. They drill it in the next climb, and Harry Sweeney is going ballistic up the climb. When you're going ballistic up a climb and you're 200 kilometers into a race called Amstel Gold, the sixth monument, you are doing nothing except for helping Tadej Pogačar and Remco Evenepoel. You are hurting the legs of your teammates, Ben Healy and Nelson Palace, that would rather be following UAE team members and let their legs being destroyed, or having Tadej Pogačar up the road and then your teammates chasing him. But instead, they're giving Tadej Pogačar and Remco Evenepoel a free ride. Now, Remco Evenepoel, you have to understand, has been chasing at some point in time during the race before the cameras came on for 30 kilometers back there when he got held up in the crash with Jonathan Narvaez. So we go back into 55 kilometers to go with EF Education on the front. You see Tadej Pogačar at the front. Remco Evenepoel has found his way to the front. He's going to lose his position a little bit, but he's there right next to Tadej Pogačar with about 51, 52 kilometers to go until Lidl Trek start getting on the front. Once Lidl Trek get on the front, it goes a little bit wider. Remco Evenepoel slots a little bit back, and it gets a little wide on these narrow roads here at Amstel Gold. And then once Lidl-Trek drill it down the twisty descent and go into the next climb, that's put Remco Evenepoel out of position as he's about 25th position. But Tadej Pogačar had one solid teammate, Brandon McNulty, left that brought him up to the beginning of the climb, and then we see Julian Alaphilippe attack. Okay, this is where I really want to get into the story here, because this is where the interview from Tadej Pogačar really starts showing us what we could expect to see at Flèche Wallonne, or we may expect to see at Flèche Wallonne and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He says in his interview that when Julian Alaphilippe attacked, with a move like that, you have to follow someone of that quality of Julian Alaphilippe, so Tadej Pogačar follows it. Now he says in his interview that once Julian Alaphilippe drops on the next climb, that he didn't really have options to go back. He said it was necessary for him to continue there. But at that moment, it's not necessary. At that moment, Tadej Pogačar can still sit up and go back to the group. Now the problem is, if you go back to the group, and we'll call it about 50 riders back there after the acceleration from Julian Alaphilippe and Tadej Pogačar, if you go back to the group, you have some problems, but you have one teammate that can help take care of those. That's called Brandon McNulty. So if Tadej Pogačar was to sit up when Julian Alaphilippe blew, and it was Tadej Pogačar's acceleration that blew Julian Alaphilippe, so he can back off a little bit on that climb, but the peloton's close behind, so maybe they get caught. But if he backed off and they don't get caught, Julian Alaphilippe works on the flat sections at the top with Tadej Pogačar. Maybe they extend that time gap out further. Or you sit up and go back to the peloton and you reshuffle. But you don't have to completely reshuffle, because you have Brandon McNulty back there who can easily ride 10, 15, maybe 20 kilometers more, which would get you deeper into the race and allow the legs of Tadej Pogačar to recover from that effort of Julian Alaphilippe and then put in another attack later. Okay, he chose not to do that. So now the important marker here when we're listening to the interview of Tadej Pogačar is, what is his power meter telling him? Immediately when I was watching Amstel Gold from the Chesterfield and I'm looking at Tadej Pogačar dropping Julian Alaphilippe, I'm thinking the Slovenian does not look at his best. He does not look bad. He is solo going up the road at Amstel Gold with 40 plus kilometers to go. So he does not look bad, but he does not look at his best, and mainly because when you start looking at the gap behind at about 10 and 15 and 20 seconds maximum time, that tells you that Tadej Pogačar has not have the same kind of explosivity in his legs that we're normally used to seeing. So now the mistake that Tadej Pogačar is making is the power meter. The power meter is the be-all, end-all of every relative number that you could possibly need to be looking at, along with how you feel. Now, you cannot just make a power meter do the number that you want it to do. You can make it do it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 10K, 20K, whatever it happens to be. But Tadej Pogačar, if the legs are not telling you good sensations while you're seeing that 400, that 500 watt average power that you're putting out, if you do not have the sensation that you've had in years past or in races past, just about any race past, we go back to Strade Bianche or whatever race that Tadej Pogačar soloed at, if you don't have those sensations and you're looking at that magical number, I'll call it 450 watts, he's pulling at the front. If he does not have the magical feeling in his legs that he's had in years past, then the option immediately should be, instead of dropping Julian Alaphilippe, power it back down, go back, have Brandon McNulty control the peloton as best as he can, and attack later in the race so that you don't need 40, 45 kilometers at 450 watts. Because you can make a power meter do some magical numbers, but you cannot make it do it for 45 kilometers. That's the mistake that Tadej Pogačar made at Amstel Gold, is the moment he dropped Julian Alaphilippe, does the power meter read the right number? And if it's reading the right number, then the most important next factor you can figure in on your math to make it to the finish and win Amstel Gold is, how are my legs feeling at this magical number that at the moment I'm calling 450 watts? I don't know what the number is, but we'll just call it that so that we keep it simple and easy here. If he doesn't have that, he's got to go back, and then he has to rely on Brandon McNulty to cover attacks. And he has one other option back there, certainly. He has the option of keeping the eye on Remco Evenepoel, because Remco Evenepoel, as we all know, is not a rider that's afraid to work with Tadej Pogačar. So if Brandon McNulty cannot control the peloton and a breakaway was going to make it up the road again with under 40 kilometers to go after Tadej Pogačar went back to the peloton, then Tadej Pogačar's next move, if Brandon McNulty cannot control the peloton, is where is Remco Evenepoel? If Remco Evenepoel's near him, then you can easily go over Remco Evenepoel and say, I'm going to put Brandon McNulty on the front, coming into this next climb, be on my wheel, we're going to light it up, you and I are going to go across. I've done it many times throughout my career where I've had breakaways go up the road, had my teammates blow up. I've jumped across to go to that break, and I've been with other riders while I'm going across the gap, and I've looked over at those other riders, and I've said, don't worry, we'll make it across. Stay together, stay smooth, we'll make it across. Once we get there, we'll start racing for the win. So that is always a tactic that Tadej Pogačar can employ, but he chose not to use it, and when we look at his interview, he says, well, he decided to go with the option of going solo. Now, another thing that was really magical about his interview, he said, well, there's 15 guys back there chasing me. And then 2, Skilmos and Remco Evenepoel, were coming and chasing me, and they're strong guys. That's why they caught me. Well, to say that's kind of a little bit ridiculous, because for the last 4 seasons, almost nobody catches Tadej Pogačar. We've seen it happen, of course, but it's rare. So again, you go back to the power meter. Does the power meter read correctly, and how does your legs feel at that 450 watts? That's all that matters. In the interview, all Tadej Pogačar really needed to say is, well, I was putting out good numbers, but I didn't have good legs. It couldn't last for 45 kilometers. I went too deep. I pushed it too hard. They caught me. That's what happened. Okay. Then there's one other magical thing in his interview. This was a brilliant interview here, if you know how to read it correctly, where Tadej Pogačar says, well, after Paris-Roubaix, he needed to take a little rest. Now remember, Paris-Roubaix was 1 week ago. Extremely difficult race with the cobblestones and the vibrations on the muscle, and a different sporting event, kind of. You're like, hey, we're still on the bikes. They're still on the bikes, but the cobblestone is going to give them muscles all throughout the body, and it's going to make them a little bit sore. So that wording that he said, a little rest, tells me that he probably didn't train very hard from Paris-Roubaix coming into Amstel Gold, which tells me that he could become a little rusty. Now, I could be wrong. He could be a lot fatigued from Paris-Roubaix, but when we look at the ride at Amstel Gold, he was solo for 25, 30, 35 kilometers until he got caught with 7K to go. So he still had some really good form. I believe what we saw was Tadej Pogačar at Amstel Gold was a little too rested from Paris-Roubaix, and then he was a little bit rusted starting Amstel Gold. So I think we'll see him better at Flèche Wallonne, and then I think we'll see him better at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Now, the only problem that Tadej Pogačar has is, of course, that Remco Evenepoel is very fresh. Remco Evenepoel had problems at Amstel Gold with the crash in the 30 kilometers of chasing with his teammates to get back on. Then he was out of position once we go into those climbs with Lidl Trek on the front, and he's 25th position back there when Tadej Pogačar is attacking. That's a problem. That's a big problem, but he used a lot of energy. Remco Evenepoel said in his interviews that I've read is that he believes he could have won Amstel Gold. I believe he has a shot at winning it too, and he says if he didn't crash, basically he would have won Amstel Gold. Well, that would have been a different scenario altogether. Let's say he didn't crash and Remco Evenepoel's at the correct position at the right moment when Julian Alaphilippe's attacking and Tadej Pogačar is there too. Well, Remco Evenepoel goes with him. They drop Julian Alaphilippe. We know that's fact. And then we know that Remco Evenepoel and Tadej Pogačar would have worked together. That would have changed the chemistry altogether. Tadej Pogačar would have had more rest on the Belgian rider's wheel from Soudal Quickstep, and it would have been a completely different scenario coming into the finish. I cannot predict who would have won Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but I can guarantee you no one could with 100% certainty want to bet their house on whether Remco would have won had he not crashed and gone pull for pull with Tadej Pogačar. Instead, having Ilan van Wilder pulling for 8, 9K back there, and then bridging across quickly to Skilmos, then having Skilmos do a bunch of help back there while they bring Tadej Pogačar back, as Tadej Pogačar solo in the win the whole time on his own. Remember, it's a full headwind going into Amstel Gold finish there for the last 15 kilometers if we go back to the interview of Tadej Pogačar and use his words. So, Remco Evenepoel saved a ton of energy, spent a ton of energy chasing, but of course his teammates are probably on the front for him chasing that time after the crash with Jonathan Narvaez. So he's sitting on the wheel, and when you're following your teammates back, yes, you're going fast, there's no doubt about it, but you're also not stressed out. It's not curb to curb. It's your teammates on the front. You're a little more relaxed. They get the job done. They pull you back onto the front. So it would have been a completely different scenario. But we certainly have to understand that Remco Evenepoel's on exceptionally good form, and when we start Flèche Wallonne, and then especially in the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, we're going to see if Tadej Pogačar is too tired from Paris-Roubaix or too rested. If he comes good and he is to win Flèche Wallonne, then everybody better be worried at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, because that means that Tadej Pogačar just got the amount of rest that he needed from Paris-Roubaix, went into Amstel Gold a little bit rusty, but blew the rust off got it all back waxed up again in the legs, and he's feeling great again. Now he comes in the Flesh. If he wins Flesh, everybody better be worried at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But if he doesn't look super there at Flesh, remember when we get in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, Remco Evenepoel is going to be getting better and better with the rest that he's had starting the season so late, and coming into Amstel Gold as only his second race. Flesh Wallonne his third. Liège-Bastogne-Liège will be his fourth. That will be the time when we start seeing the Belgian kid really arriving at his best form, I believe anyways. And then Tadej Pogačar, and we're going to see a great battle at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But remember, guys, when you're looking at your power meter, super important. If you can produce the power, that's all fine and dandy. But producing the power and holding the power for 45 kilometers takes two factors. The power has to be there, and the good sensations have to be there. Otherwise, you got to back the throttle off, go back to the peloton, hope that Brandon McNulty can control the peloton, and then always have Remco Evenepoel near your side if you're Tadej Pogačar. That was the mistakes made at Amstel Gold. Like and subscribe. You guys know that, of course, I bring you all the coaching analysis of the races. I do not do recaps. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the Butterfly Effect real soon for Flesh Wallonne.